She married her enemy's brother for revenge. He married her for convenience. They both made a huge mistake. Lyra stood before the towering, cold glass facade of the Thorne family estate, the weight of her father's disgrace resting heavily on her shoulders. Her mission was simple: marry Damian Thorne, the quiet, unsuspecting younger brother of Victor Thorne, the man Lyra believed ruined her father and stole their legacy. Damian was merely the collateral damage in her calculated plan for revenge. The marriage was purely a business arrangement. Two desperate families consolidating power, with Damian needing a stable partner to access his trust fund, and Lyra needing access to the Thorne family's inner circle. Damian was cold, aloof, and intensely private, signing the prenun with the efficient detachment of a man ordering lunch. He looked at Lyra not with desire, but with a weary, distant suspicion, as if she were a difficult piece of art he was forced to acquire. Lyra matched his coldness, burying the white-hot core of her hatred deep beneath a flawless exterior. She studied the elegant curve of his jaw and the guarded intelligence in his dark eyes, reminding herself that beneath the polished veneer, he was a thorn, and therefore an extension of her enemy. As the pen clicked, sealing her fate to Damian, Lyra didn't feel triumph. She felt a chilling, calculated resolve. The marriage was an empty shell, but it was her key to access Victor's vulnerabilities. The only immediate problem was the unexpected, unnerving way Damian's presence made her heart betray her mission with a strange, undeniable pulse of awareness. The wedding was a suffocating display of wealth and minimal emotion. It was a silent transaction performed before 100 bored, powerful guests. Lyra wore white, feeling like a hypocrite wrapped in the symbol of purity while planning destruction. Damian stood beside her, his hand resting formally on the small of her back, a touch that felt sterile and yet oddly grounding. As they exchanged vows, Lyra's internal monologue was a steel mantra: for Papa, for the truth. She looked at Damian, who recited his lines with practiced formality, noting the fine tension around his eyes. She knew he saw her as a cold, calculating opportunist. He had no idea she was a vengeful operative. He just looked guarded, deeply uncomfortable with the spectacle, and profoundly weary of his family's obligations. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Damian leaned in, his voice a low, dry whisper meant only for her ear. "Welcome to the family, Lyra. Try not to break anything important." His dark sarcasm was a subtle challenge that Lyra met with an equally icy, composed smile. They shared a brief, awkward, obligatory kiss, a purely formal press of lips that instantly sent a jarring, unwelcome bolt of electricity through Lyra, shattering her carefully constructed resolve for a terrifying second. She pulled back quickly, her mind screaming against the chemical betrayal. The marriage was now legal, but the emotional contract was already broken before it began, and Lyra knew her resolve would be tested immediately by the man who was meant to be her victim. Their new life was a lesson in polite, cold detachment. The immense Thorne penthouse felt like a luxurious prison, and their marriage was governed by 3 rules: separate bedrooms, minimal public interaction, and 0 emotional interference. They were partners in name only. Lyra began her subtle intelligence work, sifting through public records and social calendars, seeking any weakness in Victor's empire. She found Damian's presence to be a constant, infuriating distraction. He was rarely home, throwing himself into obscure philanthropic projects far outside the family's main business, a choice Lyra interpreted as laziness. Yet, she started noticing the small, humane details. He always left a fresh cup of coffee outside her bedroom door, even though they barely spoke, and he showed genuine, patient kindness to the aging house staff. One evening, Lyra was struggling to open a jammed wine bottle, cursing softly under her breath. Damian appeared silently, took the bottle from her, and opened it effortlessly. "Frustration is inefficient," he stated, his voice devoid of judgment. He handed her the glass, their fingers brushing for a moment. In that brief, simple exchange, Lyra saw not the enemy's brother, but a man who was quietly, fundamentally decent. A man who complicated her revenge plan by daring to be human. His unexpected warmth was the first crack in her carefully built shell, and she realized the hardest part of her mission wouldn't be attacking Victor, but suppressing her growing confusion about Damian. Lyra attempted her first deliberate act of sabotage, feeding a minor, damaging piece of insider information to a competitor, a move that would cost Victor a small, symbolic loss. She stayed late in Damian's study to cover her tracks, the screen glowing with incriminating data. Damian walked in unexpectedly, freezing Lyra mid-act. Her heart hammered in her chest, convinced her plot was exposed. Damian, however, looked weary, not suspicious. He saw the intense focus on her face, the mess of papers, and the time, and completely misinterpreted her anxiety. "Still working on that passion project of yours?" he asked, assuming she was building a legitimate marketing portfolio rather than plotting corporate ruin. Lyra quickly minimized the financial files. Damian walked over to the globe on his desk and spun it idly. "I used to do this, stay up all night, obsessed with proving myself." "You're brilliant, Lyra. Don't burn yourself out trying to satisfy external expectations." He offered her a bottle of expensive water and gently massaged his own tense neck. Lyra was stunned by his easy empathy and total misjudgment of the situation. He sat beside her, not prying, but genuinely encouraging her ambition, which he assumed was noble. His quiet support was more disarming than any direct confrontation would have been. Lyra felt a crushing wave of guilt. Damian was extending peace when she was plotting war. His unsolicited kindness was tying her hands and making her question the purity of her revenge. The lines between enemy's brother and husband began to blur dangerously. One rainy evening, Damian returned home from a remote charity trip, favoring his left leg. He was attempting to quietly bandage a deep gash on his shin in the kitchen when Lyra found him. His usual cool composure was gone, replaced by a grimace of pain. Lyra's trained composure instantly broke. She instinctively rushed to help, taking the clumsy gauze from his hand. "Let me see. Don't be ridiculous," she ordered, her tone shifting from icy indifference to urgent command. As she efficiently cleaned and dressed the wound, her fingers inevitably grazed his skin. The proximity was immediate and overwhelming. Damian was forced to lean back against the counter, his stormy gray eyes locked on hers, utterly exposed in his moment of physical vulnerability. The intensity of his gaze was a stark confession. The protective barrier he always maintained had utterly dissolved, revealing a depth of attraction that mirrored her own suppressed yearning. Lyra felt the blood rush to her face, suddenly hyper-aware of his strong body, the scent of antiseptic mixing dangerously with his clean, masculine cologne. "Why are you helping me?" he asked, his voice rough, cutting through the silence. "I don't know," she whispered honestly, pulling the bandage tight. She realized that the initial, distant respect had morphed into a powerful, uncontrollable physical chemistry. This moment of vulnerability, his pain and her instinctive care, was the final, devastating piece of evidence that her mission was failing, replaced by a desperate, shared need. Lyra prepared for her second, decisive strike, exposing Victor's firm's unethical accounting practices, a move that would cause immense public damage. She had the data ready to upload when Damian called her into the study. He had just returned from a board meeting, looking unusually stressed. "I'm changing our contract terms," he announced, his voice firm. Lyra stiffened, assuming he had discovered her plot. "I'm transferring a significant portion of my trust fund to a blind, joint charitable trust. It reduces my overall available wealth, but it insulates us from any hypothetical family scandal." He explained that he foresaw Victor making risky moves and was simply protecting their future together. His preemptive measure unknowingly blocked Lyra's planned attack route, as the accounts she was targeting were now legally insulated under Damian's new, protective structure. Lyra stared at him, the cursor frozen over the upload button. He wasn't plotting against her. He was actively shielding her, sacrificing his own financial autonomy to ensure her stability, based on a mistaken assumption of mutual trust. She saw the genuine, weary concern in his eyes. How could she destroy the man who was silently building a safe harbor for her? The realization was crushing. Lyra deleted the file. Her revenge wasn't just complicated. It was now actively hurting the man she was falling for. The man who, despite the cold marriage, had become her unwitting protector. She knew she had to confess her initial plan, but the truth felt too dangerous. The emotional tension of Lyra's mission conflict became unbearable. That evening, sitting by the immense penthouse window overlooking the glittering city, Lyra finally broke. She didn't reveal the revenge plot, but she confessed the real, visceral pain that drove her. Victor ruined my father. He promised protection during a merger, and then he deliberately crushed him, leaving him with nothing but disgrace. Her voice cracked with genuine sorrow, recounting the years of struggle. Damian listened in silence, his expression darkening not with suspicion, but with a profound, shared understanding. When she finished, he didn't offer empty corporate condolences. He opened up about his own family tragedy. The years of silent abuse and emotional manipulation under his own father, and the crushing expectation that had driven him away from the family business and into philanthropy. Victor, he's never been the villain people see. He's a good man trapped by my father's expectations, always cleaning up the family messes. He's just as much a victim as you are. Damian reached out, taking her hands gently. I know pain, Lyra. I know what it feels like to seek justice, even if it feels hopeless. Don't fight this alone. His vulnerability was a powerful, irresistible force, melting the last ice around her heart. It wasn't just empathy. It was a deep, raw recognition of her soul. In that moment, the formal rules of the marriage vanished. The urgent need to comfort and connect with the man who truly understood her pain became the only reality. The embrace that followed Damian's confession was not an act of lust, but a surrender to necessity. It was a release of all the emotional tension, the guilt, and the loneliness they had carried. They moved toward the bedroom, driven by the profound desire to make their connection physical, to turn the legal contract into a genuine, passionate bond. Lyra realized with dizzying clarity that she had fallen desperately in love with her victim. Damian, who was usually so controlled, moved with a consuming urgency, claiming her with a tenderness that spoke volumes about his years of emotional restraint. The intimacy was a powerful, vulnerable act of profound honesty. Lyra surrendered not just her body, but her revenge plan, the hate, and the fear, realizing that her true future lay not in destroying the Thornes, but in building a future with this one decent Thorne. She knew then she couldn't continue the plot. She couldn't sacrifice his goodness for a ruined past. In the quiet, exhausted aftermath, wrapped in the cool sheets, Damian held her tight. No more secrets, Lyra, he murmured against her skin, making the quiet demand for truth. Lyra's heart ached, knowing she was still hiding the biggest secret of all, her original plan, but the intensity of their connection had made that path utterly impossible. She was irreversibly in love, and that meant facing the consequences of her deception. The next morning, Lyra knew she had to confess everything, but fate intervened. While searching for her own father's old business files in Damian's personal study, a nervous reflex, she found a hidden, encrypted folder labeled Victor's Cleanup. Lyra hesitated, then opened it, expecting to find proof of Victor's malice. Instead, she found detailed reports proving the opposite. Victor had been trying desperately to stop the ruin of Lyra's father, attempting to buy out the debt before it went public. But the real, chilling truth was that Victor was blocked at every turn by one person, Damian's own father, the ruthless patriarch of the Thorne dynasty. It was the patriarch who had orchestrated both the original collapse and the marriage, using Damian's trust fund and Lyra's desperation. Lyra realized with shattering clarity that she had not only married the wrong brother for revenge, but that the man she had planned to destroy, Victor, was actually protecting the man she loved, Damian, from their own father's toxicity. Just as the truth solidified, Damian walked in, seeing the incriminating files open on the screen and the raw, horrified shock on Lyra's face. He walked straight to the screen, his gaze sweeping over the data, then back to Lyra. The revelation was mutual, stripping away years of pain and confusion. The truth was a harsh, blinding light, but it didn't destroy them. It forged them into an unbreakable unit. Lyra immediately confessed her original revenge motive, her voice thick with shame. Damian didn't recoil. "I knew there was something more than money," he said, taking her hand. "But your pain was real, and now my father's guilt is real." The couple, united by the common enemy of the patriarch, sought out Victor. In a tense, private meeting, Victor confirmed the truth. He had allowed Lyra to hate him to keep the real villain, their father, from targeting Damian and Lyra's father further. "He was my only priority," Victor admitted, looking at his brother. Lyra and Damian, fueled not by revenge but by justice, used the evidence Lyra found to expose the patriarch's systemic corruption. The patriarch was stripped of his corporate control, and Damian, finally free of his father's toxic influence, took his place as the stabilizing force of the restructured Thorne Empire. Their marriage, born from deception and sorrow, was now cemented by genuine love, mutual trust, and a fierce, earned partnership. Lyra chose to stay, not because of a contract, but because she loved the kind, decent man who was never her enemy, but her destiny. Standing together on the penthouse terrace, Lyra knew the best revenge was the happy life they built together. Which part of Damian's vulnerability surprised you the most? His confession about his father, or the accidental touch? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you want more enemies to lovers stories and massive plot twists, please like this video and subscribe for more videos like this.